Hey, I decided to keep my bonnet on for this message. I've been in deep reflection all day and I felt a really strong nudge to share this message. And this is hot off the press. So if you're here for the first time and you're interested, subscribe, like, comment, and a select few of you will understand what I'm going to say here immediately. And others of you will catch it later. But anyway, everyone wants to feel safe, genuinely safe in their body, safe enough to rest without guilt, safe enough to trust what they feel, and safe enough to stop bracing for the next thing. But see, the problem is that what safety requires looks different for every person. And the mindset each person brings to the search for it shapes whether they find it or whether they keep missing it by inches. That's both the problem and the solution. And it's the premise of what I'm introducing in this video right now. You see, most conversations about healing, growth, and integration start with the mind, with understanding, with the right information, the right strategy, the right framework applied correctly. But the mind, particularly a mind that's been shaped by chronic stress, systemic pressure, and the accumulated weight of unprocessed experience, is often the last thing that can lead the way through this. The mind moralizes things. It assigns meaning, urgency, and judgment to everything it encounters. Pay attention to that. It measures progress against timelines that don't account for what the body is actually doing. It performs recovery before recovery actually happened, and the frameworks it reaches for don't produce the expected results. It concludes that something is wrong with the framework, with the process, and with the person that's trying to use it. This isn't a character flaw. It's the dysregulation we blame on the nervous system. You see, the nervous system is in constant regulated processing mode. The moralized mind is dysregulated and it interrupts that mode. And it's why so many well-intentioned frameworks for healing fall flat. Not because the insights are wrong, but because they're being filtered through the very mind that needs to be integrated into the nervous system's truth. There are 3 phases for nervous system integration, and you're hearing this for the first time. And it comes with one honest question that's often running through all of them. And that question is, how long will this take? Phase 1, the collapse. The collapse is the wake-up call. Sometimes it's a single moment of clarity that makes the previous reality suddenly illegible. Sometimes it's a setback after setback. It's a disappointment after a disappointment. It's a delay after delay until the weight of it can no longer be managed by the strategies that used to work. What the collapse challenges isn't just your circumstances. It challenges your sense of time, your relationship to money and material stability, your attention span, your relational patterns, your entire understanding of how things are supposed to work. It challenges your identity at the level your identity actually lives, not in what you think about yourself, but in what your nervous system knows to be true. But it's forced to go along with the opposite of that truth. You see, the instinct in collapse is immediate, and that is to eliminate the disorientation that comes with this. Find the cause, find the problem, get back to solid ground as fast as possible. Yet, this instinct is understandable, and it's also where the first distortion enters. The collapse is not a malfunction, it's information. The nervous system has registered that the conditions it's been operating under are no longer sustainable. Not just difficult, but they are genuinely incompatible with the life that you're trying to move forward. The disorientation isn't the problem, it's the signal that something real is shifting. You see, treating destabilization as evidence of failure weakness, or wrongness is what turns a necessary threshold into an unnecessary crisis. So the mind reaches for meaning, it reaches for judgment, because that's how it manages uncertainty. But the body, it doesn't need meaning right now. It just needs honest acknowledgement that something significant is happening and that the old strategies aren't equipped to carry it through. So breathe. The collapse doesn't make this long. Depending on the individual and the number of codependent hustle and bustle patterns that require expanded awareness, it could move through in hours, in days, in months, or in seasons. But what determines the timeline isn't the severity of what collapsed. It's how quickly the moralization releases enough for the next phase to begin. And so, the honest answer to how long will this take at this stage is long enough for the body to register that something real has changed. And the longer you delay your honesty about that, the longer you'll remain in the collapse. But the bright side is that you'll be introduced to phase 2. And so phase 2 is the phase that I talk about a lot here on this channel, and it's the in-between. The in-between space. This is the space where everyday life happens, and you often won't see it until something collapses. It's where the least honest language exists for what's happening here. The in-between is the gap between the identity that collapsed and the integrated one that hasn't come into full form yet. It's disorienting by design. The mind doesn't experience change as neutral. It experiences change as uncertainty or fear or anxiety projected into uncertainty. And uncertainty inside of a body conditioned to read safety through familiarity registers this as a threat. But what makes the in-between harder than it needs to be is the pressure to move through it faster than it moves. You see, the mind, still dysregulated, still moralizing, measures progress against old metrics. It performs recovery before recovery has even happened. It tries to rebuild the old identity rather than allowing the integrated one to emerge in its natural way. It rushes toward connection and external validation to confirm that the process is working. But the gag here is that none of this is wrong. This is what happens when the body doesn't feel safe enough to trust the process without external confirmation. Therefore, this in-between space has 3 recurring steps. Alignment happens in 3s, and they aren't linear. It's a loop, and returning to step 1 is actually the work. And so step 1 here in the in-between is to reflect honestly on your beliefs, your definitions, your attachments, and your reasons for being, not from the mind's moralized framework, but from your body's honest signal. What do you actually feel underneath the story, your mental story that you've been told to feel, and the story you've been telling yourself? This isn't about eliminating attachments or achieving some purified state of non-attachment. It's about seeing clearly what you are holding and whether what you're holding is still supporting the life that's trying to move forward. Each small, honest step toward feeling what's actually true builds capacity. Not the dramatic capacity of a breakthrough, but the capacity of the body remembering it can feel something real and come back to itself afterward. That's the only capacity that matters here. Which brings us to step 2 in the in-between, and that's giving gratitude for what's present right now. Not what you think it should be in the future or what it's been in the past, right now. not as a spiritual bypass, but as an honest recalibration, because the time is always now. The small provisions available in this moment are real, even when they don't meet the larger need. And when you are receiving them honestly, without dismissing them as insufficient or inflating them into signs of arrival, it's what keeps your nervous system oriented toward what's actually present rather than what's missing. This is where the codependent hustle and bustle beliefs about time, money, and material stability and relational connection begin to surface honestly. Because the small provisions work intelligently with the body. They're not the destination. They are the body remembering incrementally that safety is possible and that the ground can hold something before it holds everything. Which brings us to step number 3, the return. And this is the step that most frameworks don't name because it doesn't have a clean narrative arc. At some point in the in-between, you go back to life as it is, overstimulated, over-attached to something or someone, sensitive in ways that feel disproportionate, analytically spinning, spiraling, and the moralized mind reads this as regression. You've backslid, as evidence that the work that you've been doing isn't working and it hasn't worked. This isn't regression. It's the body not feeling fully safe yet. And the return to steps 1 and 2 isn't starting over. It's the actual mechanism of integration. And each pass through the loop builds slightly more capacity than the last. The body remembers that it can move through activation and come back to itself. Although it happens in small ways, that's the foundation everything else is built on. And so, having a support system is important here as well. Either a safe partner, a grounded friend or a professional, or a space that can hold you steady, like being out in nature, or a hybrid of all of the above. But this is also where this gets really tricky in a very real way. Because you see, your nervous system will often force periods of isolation onto you during your in-between phase. This can feel like abandonment, stagnation, or evidence that something is wrong with you, but it isn't. The isolation phase is very intelligent. It creates the conditions for the body to clean up your perception of the real duality at play here. The difference between healing in solitude and practicing the sharing of that healing with and through others. Because codependency can surface here and convince you that your nervous system can only integrate in connection, or that you need a specific person, a specific relationship, or a specific community to complete the process. But you see, the sharp truth here is that genuine connection in this phase becomes possible only after enough solitary work has clarified what you're actually bringing to contact with others. Otherwise, the connection becomes another container for avoidance, rather than a genuine meeting of 2 or more people doing their own work. The people, the spaces, and the conditions that are aligned with your internal work are also going through their own process. And they aren't always ready to rise to the occasion where you are. And that's not a permanent condition. And it's not a sign that alignment isn't coming. It's just the honest reality that everything and everyone in the field are moving at their own pace and being energetically or perceptually early is a real experience that requires intentional kindness with your feelings of impatience. Notice what I said there. I'm not suggesting patience. I am suggesting kindness with your impatience. You feel the difference? And so the honest answer to how long will this take in the in-between is there is no timeline. There is just a set of internal conditions built incrementally through the returning loop that make the next aligned thing possible. And so the calendar adjusts to what's shifting. And then tangible evidence moves in when safer conditions are present, not before. Which brings us into phase 3 of this whole process, integration. Now, the most important thing to understand about this phase, and the most consistently misrepresented thing in conversations about healing and growth, is that there is some ultimate finish line arrival point. Integration is not the moment everything resolves, or the larger need gets met, or how long, or the how long question finally gets a satisfying answer. Integration is the ongoing, daily, unglamorous capacity to move through activation and return gently to yourself, to hold safety and intuitive certainty simultaneously, even when external conditions don't confirm either. It's to feel the disempowerment honestly, without it becoming the lens through which everything else gets read. It is not calm all the time. It is not never getting triggered again. It is not the elimination of urgency or longing or the pain of the larger need not being met. Those things are present in an integrated life. They just don't run it. What changes in integration is the quality of the return to your body. How quickly the body finds its way back to itself after you've been triggered. How much less the moralized story about the trigger, about what the trigger means, takes hold. How the small provisions stop feeling like consolation prizes and start feeling like what they actually are. And what are they actually? They are the evidence of a staircase being built one practical step at a time toward conditions that are genuinely safer than the ones that cause the collapse. And so the mind will still keep asking, how long? And that question doesn't fully disappear. But in integration, you recognize it for what it is. It's a codependent attachment to a timeline. Every time you ask the question, it's a codependent attachment to a time. And then you return again and again and again to steps 1 and 2 in the in-between. Not because you haven't made progress, but because the return itself is the progress. Please let that land. And the full staircase of integration takes as long as it needs to, and less time than you think when genuinely safer conditions are present. And this process has been happening in human beings longer than we have had words for it. But what's different now is that we have more lived tools to navigate the disorienting space between the wake-up call and the embodied life on the other side of it. And that's worth something. Safety isn't contingent on the conditions being perfect, but it is built in relationships to internal conditions you cultivate deliberately and external ones that gradually will reflect what's being integrated. So the running question, how long, doesn't get a satisfying answer until the body stops needing one. And the body stops needing one not through discipline or surrender, but through the accumulated evidence of having moved through hard things and coming back to itself enough times that the return starts to feel like home. And that's the circle of life this message is pointing at. It's not the dramatic arc of collapse and a triumphant recovery in some spectacleized way. It's the more softer, more honest loop of reflection, provision, and return. You see, that was 3. Repeat it with as much honesty and as much kindness towards yourself as you can manage in each moment. And that's enough, because it builds over time. And in the meantime, and in between time, please be kind, be gentle with yourself, as I do the same. And I'll see you in the next video. Maybe without, or maybe with this bonnet.